Mr Speaker, I, like other members on the government side, want to focus on New Zealand's place in the world today, just reflecting on the tragic news that we all heard this morning. And I do want to join the many eloquent statements that have been made from members on all sides of this House in extending my deepest sympathy to the family of the late Lieutenant O'Donnell and to his friends, to remind them that the wishes of New Zealanders right along the country are beside them, and also not to forget the obvious grave concerns in the families of the 2 injured soldiers whose news we wait for their recovery with keen interest, of course. I think in this country there is very strong appreciation of the role of our armed forces for the invaluable part they play in defending New Zealand's role in the world. I think particularly strong support for what I call the almost quasi-political role that some of our soldiers play, and I think probably better than any soldiers in the world, actually, in supporting stability and peace and working closely in very complicated political and social situations, particularly in the South Pacific. They obviously put themselves on their line, and I was very much struck by a comment Mr Anderton made, and I just want to associate myself strongly with that, when he reminded us that the gravest responsibility that anyone who has the privilege of being a minister in any cabinet has is, of course, to take part in a collective decision to send our New Zealand citizens abroad to potentially risk their life in the defence of our values and our interests. And I strongly associate myself with Mr Anderton's comment, and I certainly know that that was very much in the minds of our ministers, as I'm sure it was when he had the privilege of being a cabinet minister himself, and I'm sure that will always continue to be the case. We unfortunately live in a world where conflict of ideas still has got the capacity to erupt into almost mindless violence. Just as, like many others, I can see enormous progress being made in terms of limiting the competition amongst nation states in the last 30 or 40 years through elaborate understandings involving disarmament, involving closer trading agreements, involving diplomacy. And just when we thought in 1989, when the great dividing barrier in Europe finally fell, we thought we might be able to put the clash of nation states at least substantially behind us, while we still have to acknowledge, of course, there are one or two trouble spots like Korea where that traditional threat still exists, that this new menace of international terrorism arose to threaten us in our homes, in our own countries, or when we're visiting other countries. It's a threat that is against the very basis of civilization. And unfortunately, while I strongly associate myself with those who believe that armed force can never be the final answer to this, it is regrettably part of the final answer, and we just cannot escape that. Clearly, we will be relying on social change, on change in attitudes, on better education, on better development opportunities to deal with the roots of international terrorism. And I do see it as a death rattle of those who are resisting modernity. But at the end of the day, we cannot simply tolerate a situation where a country was being used as a training base for international terrorists, who then turn the very forces of globalization against people in New York without a response. And I think that while it's a very grave issue to commit our people to a collective response to that, it's an appropriate decision of the previous government, and I think it was an appropriate decision of this government to continue that contribution. Obviously, we all look forward to a day when that will not be necessary, when the Afghan people, as the Prime Minister has said publicly in the course of today from Vanuatu, when they can look after their own security. And obviously that's a huge challenge facing the people of Afghanistan. In the meantime, we are there, we're trying to make a contribution, and I think that while New Zealanders are obviously deeply concerned about the safety and welfare of the New Zealanders who are involved in that collective effort, I think now is the time to stand behind our people on the front line. So I just want to strongly support their efforts. I am obviously looking at looking at the way in which we can all contribute to the families of the people and give them our support in the months ahead.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to agree with about 90% of